they're doing through their church and their ministry on generosity. And I guess I would assert, so I'm going to whip through these slides a little bit fast, and if you want me to stop longer in any of the topics, we're going to try and really protect that Q&A time. Because as Steve knows, I always say, we're going to try and be light, tight, and bright. So let's just whip through these slides. There's a lot of concepts.
So they can
yeah, totally. Perfect. That's so good. Yeah. They asked me as a presenter to say, what's the big idea? And the big idea is that generosity, I would assert, is one of the most neglected spiritual disciplines. If you think of discipleship as the act of making disciples and growing Christ followers through deep transformation, it strikes me that the world's kind of beating us at our own game. And I've spent 20 years in fundraising. I did 4 large hospital campaigns. I mean, the largest one I was involved in, $104 million. Brought about $850 million of transformation. The world gets giving, philanthropy, and generosity. And yet, when you think about where did the world learn about it, and Laurel Bunker set us up perfectly with the talk in James about the generous God we serve, it all came from Jesus. And we'll talk about that in some of these slides. But again, in my 20 years of secular philanthropy, I just saw time and again the concept of vision, the concept of relationship building, the concept of the ask, the concept of stewardship. At one point, that was in one of my titles at a big teaching hospital in Canada, and I thought, stewardship, now we're talking Jesus and the Bible, like what is this all about? It's fantastic. But it's also, I guess, I was on a Zoom call with Assemblies of God World Missions last summer, and we were waiting for everyone to gather, and one of the questions for any of you who've been through that process is, what is just plain wrong? And Hannah knows because she was on this with me. And I said, what is just plain wrong is that we are in the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth this world has ever seen. And the universities know about it, and the hospitals know about it, and United Ways know about it, and the church, for some reason, seems a little bit blissfully unaware. So I don't know about you, that kind of gets me revved up. So let's walk through this, and you can see where I'm trying to go with this. So let's claim generosity back as something really good, created by God. We do not need to be ashamed to ask our people to be generous, because you know what? The world's doing it. So we might as well do it and build God's kingdom. I was part of a Barna Generosity cohort last fall with a bunch of pastors all across the nation. So much fun. One of them that really impressed me is Sharon Hottie Miller. She and her husband Ike founded a church called Bright City Church in Durham, North Carolina. And I went back and looked at the video, knowing I was going to share with you guys this morning. And I grabbed some of the things that she said because I think they were so profound, they just hit me between the eyes. She said, giving is an act of worship, and is this expression of our worship. Through giving, we tangibly demonstrate the priority of God in our lives. We can sing songs about how God is faithful and how we can trust Him, but at the end of the day, this is just lip service if we're not trusting Him with our actual lives. The thing Jesus put His finger on time and again was giving. If you want to know where their treasure is, look at their possessions. Look at what they do with their money. Jesus said this is what forms us. She actually went on and called it liturgy. And so I don't know about you, I want to be a person of generosity, so this kind of inspires me. And for any of you go, oh my word, is she off track theologically? Here are all the verses. I will not, because we've got these 15 minutes of this breakout, I will not look them all up or reference them all. But they're in there. We give in light of the eternal perspective, that our home is in eternal things, not in earthly things. We give because of the preeminence of Christ. We give in light of the fact that Jesus is preeminent and first in all things. We give because it's gospel driven. We give because generosity is a privilege. We give because we want to be a conduit of God's grace. And then finally, we give because of that trust in God. Our investment in God's economy is over the world economy, is a reflection of where our trust truly lies. So I don't know if that gets you revved up. It does to me too. Here's an interesting thing for all of you as church leaders, and the president of the firm that I serve with, Jim Shepard, I'm with Generis out of Atlanta, although I live right here in the Twin Cities in Egan. He talked about the to and the from, and sometimes as church leaders we get hung up on the to and the from. And his whole thing was, so often we're talking about where does the money go to, right? It's like, will you support this? Will you support that? As opposed to, where does the money come from? And it is the surrendered heart of a transformed follower of Jesus. This includes specific discipleship as it regards the relationship between our faith and our money and our possessions. And he's saying most churches are spending an inordinate amount of time talking about the to. And whereas the from element is actually where the long-term change in giving and generosity occurs. So there you go. That's why I gave you guys slides, because there's a lot in here and you might want to think about it later on too. Here's the other thing I've noticed. Generous churches are led by generous pastors. You know, part of the reason I can rave all day long about Jan and Steve Rasmussen is to watch their generosity and watch them give a house in Africa to a ministry that they've been involved in. I mean, of course they pastor a generous church because they are leading with generosity themselves. Here's another thing, and this might be a little bit of a difficult truth. Because I kind of, as my realtor would say, you get the cozy dope. Like a lot of people end up giving me the insider's update. I've had pastors share with me, I wasn't ready to move forward with you and these crazy ideas you had for unleashing generosity in my church. Money had been an idol for me. I've had pastors say that. I've had pastors say, God had to do a good work in me first. One guy put me off for like 3 years. And then here's another one. Just a couple months ago in Houston, large mega church that fills a 10,000 seat auditorium 3 times on Sunday morning. He said, with our former pastor, my predecessor, the quickest way to get ignored at our church was to make a large gift. I don't know if that happens among any of your churches, but I have seen it happen many times. I know it seems laughable, but it is a thing. Here's the other thing, back to the insider's update. I have interviewed over 200 financial leaders, predominantly here in the Twin Cities, but in other states as well. And here's some of the highlights of what I've heard from people. One of the elders goes, can you just coach my pastor on vision? This lady runs a very successful business. She's ready to make that investment in the next go. And she said, I just feel like my pastor is all the time running around sticking holes in the fingers, or whatever, fingers in the holes in the dike to make sure that we can survive as a church. And I want to get inspired by vision. So I guess I'm sharing that with you as church leaders to know you might have some people sitting in your pews who are thinking the same thing. I've had a financial leader of a large church here in the West Metro, and I asked this church, I said, can you give me your top 20 most engaged people? And they did, and I interviewed them, and one of them said, oh, I don't tithe to that church. I tithe to Andy Stanley in North Point out of Atlanta. I'm not sure my church needs the money, and I trust that North Point will manage it well. I didn't say this because I was going to make you happy. I'm just honest with you. Here's another one, a financial leader from a large publicly traded company here in the Twin Cities, and he and his wife said, we don't trust our church to tithe to it. We don't want the church dependent on us. If we get transferred, we're not sure if they can handle our giving well. Our church receives a fraction of what we're capable of giving. So I'm just being honest with you. This is the interesting thing is I've kind of gone, okay, God, why did you have me at Moody? Why did you have me with this fascination of all things financial? And I've really heard some amazing things since I started down this line. But here's what I know for sure about unleashing generosity. And these are scriptural concepts too, so I know you know them, but pulling them all together is another thing. People are inspired by vision. People appreciate relationship building. People appreciate being stewarded well. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And then I think as leaders, we have to ask well. We have to ask without apology. Again, the world is so good at asking for people to be generous, and so often in the church, we're apologetic. And I'm just saying, we don't need to be. And then we need to plan and execute well. I'm always a fan of let's do a few things and do them well. This is a crazy slide, and I'll just apologize. It's so busy you can't even hope to read the print in it. But what it is, it's about casting vision well. And again, back to the world beating us our own game. There's this high-end women's clothing business, LaFleur. And sure enough, this January, they were bold enough to write their 10-year out press release. They kind of went, okay, where do we want to be by 2033? And so they were bold enough. So if you look up this online, I just included the first couple paragraphs of it. But here's the thing. They said, we reflected what kind of company we wanted to build over the next decade. This is Sarah LaFleur. Miyako and I decided to expand our definition of whom we supported. Empowering our customers through our products was a good beginning. We also wanted to give back to our female mill workers and manufacturers. We wanted to become even more family friendly to our employees and ultimately make a major commitment to serving underprivileged women. That's a business we knew we could be proud of. That's casting vision. That is saying, who do we want to be in 10 years' time? And I guess I would say that challenge for all of us, for the churches and ministries we're involved in, like if we really cast vision, what defines success 10 years out? Where do we want to be? Because I'll tell you, the financial leaders in your church are going to respond to that. And they're going to go, if you don't believe me, read Circle Makers with Mark Patterson, right? And he talks about going from like $30,000 gifts to $3 million gifts. And it is all about casting vision. One of my heroes in this is Henry Nguyen, bless his soul. He wrote that his group put together fundraising, his ministry, if any of you have written it, was based on a talk that he did in Toronto. I'm Canadian, so of course I feel very proud of that. But he talks in there, we have a vision that is amazing, exciting. We are inviting you to invest yourself through the resources God has given you. Your energy, your prayers, your money in this work which God has called us to. Our invitation is clear and confident. Yeah, you don't hear an apology in here. It's clear and confident because we trust that our vision and mission are like trees planted by streams of water which yield their fruit in its season and the leaves do not wither. I mean, God is the best pastor of vision. Here's another thing I learned in hospital fundraising, and a wonderful man, he's since passed away, but delightful guy, Gerald Panis. I heard him speak in Michigan years and years ago. And he did research time and again, particularly among financial leaders, people who can write 6- and 7-figure gifts. I call those difference makers, people who can really propel your church forward or your ministry forward. And he said time and again, people want to make gifts to change lives and save lives. And so there's also the 3 E's that he would mention: energy, enthusiasm, and empathy. And I would say the challenge for us as church leaders, how well are we doing sharing highlights on how our church is changed? I mean, think about it. I mean, I love that I was in an acute care hospital. We had a transplant program, intensive care, cardiac. That's changing lives and saving lives. But then you think of the wholeness of the human being beyond physical and spiritual, and the church has changed. I mean, we got the corner on this, right? Like, ministry is really changing lives and saving lives. Just in December, Barna did research on high-capacity givers. And trust me, you all have high-capacity givers in your church. Many don't wear a t-shirt saying that, but they're often running under the radar. And here's the deal. High-capacity givers, they're aware of their influence. They're focused on the big picture in the long term. Again, big shout out to Laurel Bunker talking about the big picture in the long term. High-capacity givers see the spiritual dimension of their giving. So I guess my coaching to all of us is we shouldn't say that these people owe us a gift. They don't. We need to cast the vision. We need to share the outcomes. We need to create an environment where their needs are met, that they feel they're being good stewards of the money God has entrusted. I've literally sat with people, including those other folks who I mentioned, kind of gave the insider's update on how they felt, and they need to feel assured that the church is headed in the way God wants it to go. So again, don't be shy about sharing the spiritual dimension, the calling on your lives, how much prayer goes into your ministry. I don't know about you, when Ben saw me this morning, I was up at 3 a.m. praying over all of you. I don't know, that touches my heart. You know, and I think the more you guys share all of that within your church situations, you are going to have givers respond. These next 3 slides are a little bit repetitive, so I know we're trying to crunch against time, so I'll just whip through them real fast. But basically, this wonderful woman I met in Toronto years ago, Penelope Burke, she actually set out to try and find out what would be the best way to recognize donors. And so she's literally sitting in the living room of donors who can make 6- and 7-figure gifts, and they're off running to find their fridge magnets or their little paperweights or whatever. And she's like, no, seriously, like, what appeals to you the most? And this is where it came up. Consistently, donors said they need prompt, personalized acknowledgement. And then they need confirmation that their gifts were set to work as intended. And then they need measurable results on their gifts at work prior to being asked for another contribution. And again, it's easy to read this research and go, yeah. And then I started applying it through the 22 members of our team at the Hospital Foundation, and it changed the way we thank donors, it changed the way we did newsletters, it changes it all. Once you know this is what your donor needs to unlock that next gift, and so to some degree, you can see it again. The gift was received, you're pleased to get it, it's set to work as intended. The project or the program to which the gift was directed had or is having the desired effect. And you can see some quotes from donors in here as well. And quotes about thank you calling. If a board of directors or, I mean, at our church for we started it in the pandemic doing thank you calling and praying over our people. And it has just made such a difference. People really appreciate being appreciated and knowing they're being prayed for. As you disciple your people, here are 5 types of givers. And again, I know I'm flipping through like hours worth of stuff just within a short time, and we can touch on any of this in the question and answer if you'd like. But really how at Generis we see it is level 1, you have an initial giver, and they're asking, what do I do with my stuff? And then you have level 2, a consistent giver. What do I do with God's stuff? Then you have level 3, an intentional giver. What does God want me to do with God's stuff? And then we have level 4, a spiritual giver. What does God want me to give from what God has provided? And then level 5, a surrendered giver. What does God want me to keep from where God has provided. I mean, literally, Rick Warren has so much
That's exactly
to say
what I was
about
going
this,
to say.
right?
Rick
I think
Warren.
he's flipped the 90-10, right?
Yeah.
They're living on 10, they're giving away 90. I mean, bless him, so good. And he's pretty happy about it too. It's not, no one's twisting it away from him. So again, because we don't have a whole bunch of time in this session, I just threw these out, things to ponder. We now have a ministry of giving at our church in Egan twice a year, spring and fall. We get together for a simple meal with all of our folks who have this gift of giving. And we do everything from Play-Doh exercises where we form the Play-Doh into some of our earliest memories of generosity, and we have very fulsome discussions at our tables about generosity. That's one of the things to ponder. Has giving been a part of your spiritual discipleship journey? Why do we ignore financial leaders in our churches? Or maybe you don't. There was enough reaction here that maybe you guys aren't ignoring your financial leaders, in which case I'm like, yay. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the largest intergenerational wealth transfer this world has ever seen, and the church doesn't seem to be responding to that. Does it concern you? And then our CEO, Jim Shepard, shared that too many churches look like more like organizations trying to raise support than the body of Christ trying to produce deeply formed disciples. And I think that's back to that to and from be encouraging it from a surrendered heart. And then we're not hearing a conversation about giving and stewardship as a hallmark of discipleship. Do you agree? Do you disagree? On a way lighter note, so those are all the heavy questions. On a way lighter note, I have a friend who fundraises at Mayo, just south of here, and he shared this slide a couple of years ago. It's actually from the Journal of Nature Neuroscience. And you can see, I'll just cut to the chase, not because all the science talk, that part of the brain that is lit up, that's the same part of the brain that lights up during chocolate, sex, and cocaine. And it's also the same part of our brain that lights up during philanthropy and altruism. So whenever you think, oh, I'm feeling bad about asking our people to give, are you kidding? That's letting them have that part of their brain light up. That's not a bad thing. We're actually hardwired for philanthropy and altruism. We do not need to apologize for asking our people to participate in this. So finally, as we wrap up here, before we open up for questions, this is important and honorable work, and you can see it time and again in Scripture. The world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. The one who blesses others is abundantly blessed. Those who help others are helped. I don't know about you, that's the life I want to live. I want it to be bigger. I don't want to be stingy and smaller. So we know people want to make gifts to change lives and save lives. People give because it feels good. Don't forget the 3 E's. Bring your energy, your enthusiasm, and empathy. This isn't an area we have to apologize for. And then finally, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is worked within us. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus through all generations, forever and ever. Ephesians 3:20 and 21. So that is literally your highlights of, I think I would call that like Oprah, what I know for sure. And there you go. Rich, do you want me to just ask questions?
Let's just take a few minutes because the break lasts until 11 o'clock when you need to be in the next room, and it's still 36 minutes till 11. So you'll have plenty of time to get a cup of coffee. If you've got some questions, now's the time to ask them.
Yeah. I see a question back here. Yes?
You mentioned a couple times intergenerational wealth transfer. What exactly is that?
Yes, so Cornell University, Boston College, about 20 years ago, they started telling us about this coming intergenerational transfer of wealth. Mainly the boomers and the next group up, I'm forgetting the name, the seniors, are, as they're making their wills or estate plans, they are passing on, it's been guesstimated, I think, around $40 trillion. I've even heard as high as 60. And it's literally, there was just so much wealth created between real estate, stock market, corporate situations, investments, savers, the savers from that earlier generation. And so literally we are in the largest intergenerational. It's kind of been talked about quietly more in financial planning circles and people who are focused on planned giving or leaving a legacy. But we're literally at this point. And part of the reason I'm burdened about this is that even 20 years ago, I had seen the research from Decima Research, which said its own devices, at that point it was done in Canada, was 7% of Canadians would leave a gift in their will or estate plan. But if we as charities asked them, the number went from 7% up to 34%, like almost a quintupling, just 1 point shy of a quintupling. So I'll be honest, I was doing fundraising work. I oversaw a team of 22 fundraisers, and we had a 29-seat call center down the hall, and we were triaging like 8,000 grateful patient records per month, and so it burdened me. I went, I can't not unknow this now, because I know if we ask them, they'll act on it. So we became the beta site for a company called Legacy Leaders, and we went on the phones. We did a really nice letter from our CEO saying, so much good has been done because you've supported the hospital. World first in robotics, transplant, blah, blah, blah. However, so much more can be done. We can't even imagine what healthcare looks like in 20, 30, 40 years. As you give consideration to your will or estate plan, would you consider leaving the hospital in your will or estate plan? We did a batch of 10,000 donors through our call center, kind of 4 different segments: high capacity donors, volunteers, loyal, frequent donors. And out of it, over a 6-week calling period, we called it the Olympics of Planned Giving. And every night we'd go in and rev up all the callers, some of our best callers, and we'd be on the phones with our donors, and literally 495 people said, yes, I will include the hospital in my will or estate plan. It led to $11.7 million in pledges. When I checked in on our data, like within 11 years, within 2 years, like over $1 million cash had been received. Within 12 years, we had $3.2 million of the cash in. So it's out there. Like, people are, wealthy people around us, even people with quiet wealth in all of our congregations, are making their will or estate plans. Many do not want to leave huge gifts to their kids. They want to make a gift that will reflect their values, and investing in each of your churches and your ministries would totally reflect their values. But as you can hear, if we never ask, they're never going to know that we're either capable of it or interested in it, or they're going to send it, with all due respect to Andy Stanley and North Point. I don't know, I've never made a gift to him, but yeah, clearly that guy's given him a lot. So, I mean, I just think we need to be, like, we're just so shy about these things, and the world is so bold. Like, even I've done some investments through Elvest, and they pride themselves on, oh, we're helping women with investments and stuff. And sure enough, they came up with so much pride about, just as I was preparing this about 2 weeks ago, and they were like, we're starting a giving circle. Like, aren't we the most virtuous ever? We're not just after you for our investment money. We're going to involve you in giving. You're going to feel so good about yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, think of how hilarious that is, right? Like, you guys every Sunday or however, you're doing a giving circle like every week. And yet sometimes you're apologetic as opposed to saying, no, this is worthy of support. You can feel good about it, you know? So, another gentleman, yes.
Do you think that Barna research on the spiritual dimension of giving, because of the way our society is going, the church should have a really open door, I would think, of people desiring to give to God's ministries?
Yes, and then here's another disturbing fact that I never want to lead with, because I don't want to make you guys feel bad, but somewhere between 54% and 60% of the people in your pews aren't even giving $1 to your church.
That's true.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time trying to help pastors activate non-givers. And I was chatting with my friend from Generis, Cristobal, who does the same work over in the South, more in South Carolina. And I said, is it really 54%? He goes, yeah, I had one pastor give me big pushback, big Baptist church. So he goes, we did their data. He goes, it was 60% for him. So, I mean, that's just a reality. I think, you know, we've also seen the stats on how many people, if they had a crisis, would find it difficult to pull together $400 in cash. I mean, people are just stretched, you know, living beyond their means, or not making good financial choices, or just difficult, single parents, or whatever. I don't even know all the causes of it, but there are some people who are really stretched, you know, and I don't know if that becomes their excuse. I'm also a big fan. I've run a number of tithe campaigns with churches. I'm a big fan of Malachi 3:10. You know, if you're going to bring your first fruits, if you're going to tithe, and P.S., for any of you who are on the line about whether you want to do that, large church we did it with in the South Metro here, the year after they had a 28% increase in giving. So, yeah, we can hold God. Also, Malachi 3:10 is one of the places where he really promises your storehouses will be full. I mean, God's the ultimate author of generosity. We can read secular fundraising books till we're blue in the face, but Jesus had this all figured out long before. Any other thoughts or questions? You guys ready for coffee? Oh, question here.
Any recommendations for planned giving? Like
Who to go to?
get educated?
Oh, yeah, there are just some great resources out there. Right here in Minnesota, there's an organization I used to help with their conference and their council, the Minnesota Council on Planned Giving. And geez, my contact info is also on that last slide, so feel free to shoot me a note. I can send you links if that's good. If you just want to email me, I'm sure there's lots of others. I haven't really given that a whole bunch of thought, but there's a lot of good information out there on plan giving. And then, of course, there's, I think they changed their name, but it used to be the NCPG, the National Committee on Plan Giving, and now it's Philanthropic Partnerships or something. Yeah, but there's some great information. Here's the interesting one. So many people make plan giving way more complicated than it needs to be. NCPG, that National Committee on Plan Giving, they did research years ago and it showed like 96% of plan gifts are requests and wills. So sometimes, I don't know about you, it's easy to get wigged out by, is that a charitable remainder trust? Is that there's all these acronyms and it can get remarkably overwhelming. If you ask your people to leave the church in their will or estate plan, it's plenty enough. They got a financial advisor, they got a lawyer, let's not overcomplicate this. And then you literally have simple website update too.
I think you mentioned the National Christian Foundation or something?
Yes, National Christian Foundation, you're right. Thank you for prompting me on that. You're right. National Christian Foundation also has some fantastic resources. Thanks for the prompt, Steve. Yeah,
So
that's
I
good.
should just give a shout out for Laurel because she's also very generous. We met her through Zillow and went to
We
see
do rental
her.
properties on the side.
They were at an apartment to rent. We went to see her, and then she said, "Oh yeah, we'll just give it to you for $300-400 less. That's what you can afford." And then we got to know her better. And she said, "Well, we'll help you out sometime." We went with her, and she said, "You know, we'd like to help you with raising money for your church and for your," and so we did $500,000, including a dorm in Tanzania and a bunch of roofs, and then she's actually, her husband's on her board. Meet with her once a week, a lot of generous time, and
So fun.
and she helped us do this brochure, which is Light, Tight, Bright.
Like Ted Bright, Steve, you rock.
And you can see what she's done for us in 2 years. Like the numbers are on the back. So. And she told me not to be embarrassed. So there you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, feel free to keep going for coffee unless everyone wants to listen in on this.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we just dismiss?
Yeah.
Those who want to slip out can. Those who want to talk to Laurel, hang around.
Yeah,
See
hang
if
around.
invite her to your church to talk to your board. She's ready. Okay.
Thanks, Reg. Thanks, Dave.
So such and